How's it going, everybody? And welcome to Ask Me Anything About Politics. So, if you got any questions about politics, just let me know in the chat, and I will do my best to give you a great answer. I know that politics can be particularly weird these days and confusing. There's a lot of misinformation out there and just contrary information and propaganda, and it can be very difficult and weird to try to figure out what the government is up to these days. And you know, uh, yeah, I like to make myself available to answer people's questions, especially if you don't have like a foundational knowledge of politics. It can be really difficult to keep up with what's going on, especially, these days. And so this is a place where you can ask all of your questions about politics, and there's no judgments, there's no roasting, there's no debating. This is not one of those shows where people yell at each other and call each other names or try to own each other just so that they can have clips for their social media. This is not a debate show. This is not a screaming match. This is just a good faith engagement in questions about politics so that people can be more informed. People can have a good foundational knowledge of what the government is and what it does and how it operates. And a good place to discuss relevant information if there's anything that you were curious about or that wanted more information on. This is the place where you can ask all the questions that you don't want to ask in public because you're worried that you're going to get judged for things. Goofy Wise says the ruling class owns the levers of power. Why aren't you a communist? I'm not a communist for the same reason that I'm not a capitalist or a socialist. Goofy Wise, I believe in a mixed model system. I think there's probably some value to capitalism, though I think we're a little bit too deep in late stage crony capitalism to be able to recognize it. I think we need to do more to incentivize communist and socialist structures here in America, like socialized medicine and employee owned companies. But thank you for your question, Goofy Wise. Ada Lovelace says, what do you know about how data is modeled for party affiliation? Not a lot, Ada Lovelace. I'm not really sure what you're referring to specifically. Like, is it like polling data that you're asking about, like the way that the parties tend to try to use data to streamline their messaging? Like, is that what you're asking about? Goofy Wise says, okay, can you have mixed models when capitalism will always erode away at the government and demo for power? You don't know that is the case, Goofy Wise. I understand where you're coming from, like you're standing hard for communism, but there's no example of a flourishing mixed model that decays into late stage capitalism like we have here. So yeah, maybe the same way that you want people in Middle America to be open to the precepts of communism and socialism, maybe you can be a little bit more open to a mixed model. Ada Lovelace says lots of info is modeled party affiliation. I'm a data person, just thought you may know. Yeah, I'm still not 100% sure what you mean by modeled party affiliation. Lots of information is modeled party affiliation. Yeah, give me more details and maybe we can chat about it. Goofy Wise says, is it not in their material interest to do so? In whose material interest? In capitalist, in middle America, in billionaires? Like, come on, man. Lever 2K says, thoughts on Trump moving more towards Ukraine and NATO? Honestly, I'm fucking baffled by it. It's so fucking bananas. I think he's like mad at Putin for not, I don't know, like, wiggling a little bit towards a peace process. Yeah, I don't know. To me, it feels like a dick measuring contest. It feels like he feels disrespected by Putin, and so he is going hard in the other direction. I mean, but it's also like a it's weird overcorrection. Like nobody who actually follows this believes that it is a viable near-term option for Ukraine to regain all of their lost territory, including Crimea. And I'm not a military expert, so I'm not really coming down on one side of this or the other, but pretty much every serious person is like yeah, he went further in the pro-Ukraine direction than pretty much anybody in America who studies this. Casey Merring says, why can't we all just get along? Because billionaires profit from us fighting amongst ourselves. Fortnite says thoughts on Curtis Yarvin. Remind me who Curtis Yarvin is again. Is he one of the Young Turk guys? Cuz says thoughts on Israel threatening China. I haven't heard anything about that, but I mean it tracks. The Netanyahu government loves threatening their neighbor countries. Let's see here. Bro, we don't need to know that. Likely says, what is your stance on the United Nations recognition of a Palestinian state? I think that every country has a vested interest in putting pressure on Israel to stop doing war crimes and genocide. And if one of the mechanisms that we can use for that is recognizing a Palestinian state at the UN, then I say go for it. Jaroid says, how do you identify politically? Progressive Democrat. Advice your dad would give says, what has arguing online ever led to? I don't believe that arguing online is productive. Advice your dad would give, and so I'm with you on that. And that is why we don't argue here on the show. We just engage in good faith discussions and try to understand each other better. Let's see here. Crush Star says it's not a G side by UN definition. They actually revised it, and now it is a G side. So that is the new information. Crushed Star. Fortnite says Yarvin, non-reactionary, anti-democratic writer, court philosopher of Peter Thiel, influences J.D. Vance. Oh yeah, I don't know too much about that dude. So yeah, I mean, I am worried and terrified of everybody in the tech billionaire circle, and I guess that includes this Curtis Yarvin fellow. Goofy Wise says, in capitalism to erode at democracy when democracy cuts away at their power in place of what's best. Yeah, I mean, I'm not arguing with that at all. The billionaire class is fully invested in turning our democracy into a fascist regime just because it's better for their bottom line. So yeah, we're not arguing on that at all. CG Bake says, yay, 140 countries are already advocating for two-state solution. That's cool. Likely says, what does progressive mean? I think depending on who you talk to, they have very specific definitions of what it means to be a Democrat, a liberal, a leftist, a progressive. It seems to me, I'm not basing this off of like a massive spreadsheet that has all the different policy proposals listed. I'm just basing this off of the politicians that I like the best and the policies that I like the best. They seem to be under the progressive banner. And so I would describe a progressive as somebody who is interested in dealing with income inequality, is interested in protecting the environment, common sense gun control legislation, electoral reform to make it so that the Republican Party doesn't have such a massive advantage. Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff. Not being the most incarcerated country on the planet, shit like that. Cowboy Lemon says, thoughts on YouTube saying Biden administration pushed them to censor creators. So this is a playbook that Google has adopted in response to what Facebook has done, where they recognize that Facebook is getting a lot of favorable treatment from the Trump administration by just bending the knee and saying that they were previously censoring right-wing voices. But that is not what was going on. The Biden administration said, hey, you got a lot of people spreading misinformation about COVID and it's going to harm a lot of people. So we think it would be really good for you guys to, just do what your user community guidelines say that you are supposed to be doing and get that stuff off of the internet. Alrighty, Goofy Wise says, how would private ownership of production be allowed if it's in their interest to erode democracy? How would private ownership of production be allowed if it's in their interest to erode democracy? Goofy Wise, I mean, you're speaking about these very ethereal concepts in very concrete ways. So you're talking about they. How would private ownership production be allowed if their interests to erode democracy? That is only in a model where we allow the billionaire class to have enough power to be able to erode democracy. In a mixed model, you would potentially not have a billionaire class that is able to erode democracy because power would be more well distributed throughout the population. Bass Horizon says, what's your thought on socialism? If it hasn't worked before, why would it now? So there's never been a communist or socialist country, Bass Horizon. So there's no socialism hasn't worked or communism hasn't worked so far. We've never seen it. What we have seen are little examples of socialism and communism in countries that already exist. So, for example, here in America, we have socialism in the form of the military and the post office and public schools. Socialism is just we all kick in a little bit of money and then we use that money to buy things that benefit everybody. And communism is just workers owning the means of production. So any employee owned company like Bob's Red Mill or Publix grocery stores, those are communist. I personally believe that we have a little bit too much capitalism, unfettered crony capitalism here in America. And so we could use the government to potentially incentivize more industries to switch over to a either socialist or communist model. Maybe we can have tax incentives for companies being employee owned. Maybe we can have universal health care. That would be an example of having more socialism in this country. Ja Royd says China is a Marxist-Leninist country whose private sector is subservient to the government. That sounds accurate. That's not really my expertise. I'm not really an expert in China, but sure. Jot Punit over on Twitch says, "Yo, how are you doing? Hopefully good. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good today." Joe D says, "What about Trump buying 10% of Intel?" That is an example of crony socialism. Weirdly, the government is deciding to go into business with one single tech company in America, meaning that if you wanted to start your own company producing silicon chips, you would then be competing not only against the power of Intel, but also the US government. So this is the kind of socialism that people should have a problem with is Donald Trump, demanding that Intel give America 10% of their company. Like, it's psychotic. Jack says, thoughts on the ICE shooting this morning? Well, Jack, you know that I don't condone any kind of violence whatsoever. I am concerned about how violence against right-wing figures, regardless of who perpetuated it and for what reason, is just going to accelerate the government becoming fascist and cracking down on any kind of dissenting voice and saying that, a person like me who is just accurately describing what the government is doing is part of a rhetoric that is inspiring people to do that kind of violence. No matter how many times I come on here and say I don't condone violence, I condemn it in the strongest possible terms, and that we would do better to be a non-violent resistant movement than a violent resistant movement. They are still going to, use these things as excuses for doing their fascist dictatorship. Wes says, would interest rates be higher or lower under Kamala? Guaranteed it would be lower, because Kamala Harris would not have done a tariff policy. The reason why Jerome Powell did not lower interest rates earlier or more is because Trump's tariff policy has increased inflation in addition to slowing the economy. So right now we are facing stagflation, which is high unemployment and also high inflation. And Jerome Powell made the calculated risk of cutting interest rates a little bit, which will increase inflation, but will potentially heat up the market a little bit so that unemployment won't be such an issue. Because Kamala Harris hasn't done as many forced errors as the Trump administration has, I could pretty much guarantee that interest rates would be lower right now if this was her government. Jot Punit says violence from any side only fuels evil, no matter who was the receiver on the receiving end. Completely agree with that, Jot Punit. Quim says, do you think the attempted assassination of Trump helped him win the election? I don't know. Like, it was kind of a blip. I think pretty much everybody who was going to be swayed by that was already on board. Anybody that was on the fence because of that probably forgot that it even happened by the time November rolled around. I think that there were other issues there, the information environment being one, the incumbency bias being the other, the fact that Kamala Harris only had 100 days to mount her campaign is the third. Subtle Psycho says, violence towards oppression, absolutely. No violence. If you check out Erica Chenoweth, Subtle Psycho, you will read about how nonviolent resistance movements have a way higher level of success than violent resistance movements. Goofy Wise says, we cannot have socialism without revolution. Capitalism will never give up the power for free. Well, we have the mechanisms in a democracy to force capitalism to give up power. So yeah, I don't really buy your argument, Goofy Wise, that we are currently living in a capitalist dictatorship and have no power. The people still have power to protest and boycott and vote and put political pressure on their elected representatives. So yeah, I just don't buy your sort of like absolutist, defeatist argument there, Goofy Wise. Jack says, why do you think Trump won the majority vote? Misinformation, propaganda, the fact that Kamala Harris only had 100 days to mount her campaign, incumbency bias. Like, no matter who was in charge during 2024, whether they were to the left or to the right, no matter what country they were in, everybody felt electoral consequences from inflation. People were just mad at whoever was in charge. And so a lot of misinformation and propaganda convinced people to vote Republican. A lot of it convinced people not to vote. And there was just a general sentiment in the air that Democrats were responsible for the high prices, which was inaccurate. But that was what a lot of the billionaire funded propaganda was telling them. Subtle Psycho says, do you think it was a free and fair election? So to an extent, it was. Like, so far, I have not seen any substantive evidence that vote totals were changed in swing states. The Rockland County case is really interesting. I'm waiting to see what discovery shows us and how that shakes out. But right now, the only thing that made it not free and not fair were the kind of voter suppression tactics that Republicans always use. So closing down polling locations in Democratic areas, closing down DMVs in Democratic areas so that people can't get IDs, which they might need to vote in their states, lying, campaign finance violations, massive campaign finance violations, an unprecedented amount of dark money being flooded into social media in order to manipulate the voters. Like, those things definitely made it not fair, but no vote totals were really changed. And as far as I can see, there's no evidence of vote totals being changed right now. Jock Puneet says, well, let's say a disaster like floods happened due to ignorance from government. What would you interpret from it? I mean, I would say that we need to change whoever's in charge of the government. Let's see here. Sociology doctor says tabulator manipulation by tech bros. That sound, you mean tabulator manipulation like the voting machines? Because I haven't seen any evidence that that's happened. The Rockland County case, again, we have to wait and see how that shakes out. Goofy Wise says it's not doomerism, it's revolutionary hope. It's what has worked historically. Again, Goofy Wise, if you check out Erica Chenoweth, she makes a very convincing argument that most nonviolent resistant movements are more effective than violent resistant movements. Also, as far as like revolutionary hope is concerned, everybody that I know on that side of the political spectrum isn't doing anything. They are just kind of like waiting for the revolution to happen. Whereas I'm out here with my whole fucking ass trying to get people involved in the kind of grassroots political activism that actually makes change happen. Everybody I know on the revolution side is just like, yeah, I can't wait for us to all start throwing Molotov cocktails. Just let me know when somebody starts doing it, because then I'll start doing it. And then everybody just kind of sits around and does nothing. Right, Ace says, did you hear how the ICE building was pew-pewed at? I did, and I do not condone or advocate for any kind of violence whatsoever. And I pray for all the people that were wounded. And I worry that the Trump administration is going to use this as another Charlie Kirk assassination, Reichstag fire kind of shit. Servotron says it can only good happen. I don't know what that means. Subtle Psycho says the divide against neighbors in America is real. The propaganda worked. I mean, yeah, the propaganda worked, but we need to do the work to undo that damage by talking to people in real life and not having fights on the internet. Right, John Selfridge, great to see you again over on YouTube. The Dallas shooting, do you think it's possible that the ammo that had anti-ice on it was marked that way by someone trying to blame the left? While we really cannot trust the FBI at the moment, we can't really trust the government at the moment because they have shown us that they are willing to lie and change data in order to push their agendas, and they will fire people who are not towing the party line. I think that's a little bit of a stretch. I would need evidence that is the sort of thing that would happen. I think the stronger thing to lean on, instead of whoever wrote anti-ice messages on the bullets, was obviously like a plant from the FBI who was trying to blame the left. I think the more important thing is to point out that it doesn't really matter who did this or why. What matters is who in the world is advocating for and inciting more violence. Who has the megaphone that is doing that? I'm sure we could all find a bunch of random people on the internet who are advocating for civil war, both on the left and the right. But if you look at the higher ups, if you look at the politicians, at the newsmakers, at the influencers and content creators who have massive platforms, the people on the left are all calling for no violence, and the people on the right are just inciting and throwing gasoline on shit, like Alex Jones, Elon Musk, Donald Trump, Laura Loomer. Like they're all out there with their whole ass being like, all right, time to fucking do this, man. And I'm just like, that's so fucking irresponsible, unbelievable. And I mean, I can point to you a dozen examples of Trump inciting his base to violence, up to and including January 6th. Alrighty, let's see here. Oh, Paul Murr says it can only good happen was a Trump quote. Yeah, I remember. The dude's not great at speaking. Right, let's see here. All right, let's get back into these TikTok comments. Username says government is corrupt no matter who's in office, Democrat or Republican. So that's inaccurate. Usernamed. There is a difference between corruption depending on whether a Democrat or a Republican is in charge. So currently, Donald Trump has a crypto coin, which means that anybody can give him unlimited amounts of untraceable money. They can be from adversarial nations. They could just be literally bribing him to be pardoned, which we know has happened a bunch of times already. There is nothing on the Democratic side when Democrats are in charge that is even close to that level of corruption. And we're not even fucking talking about Tom Human accepting $50,000 bribe from FBI agents and then his case getting just fucking completely dismissed by Kash Patel's FBI department. You know, like there's a massive difference between corruption in the political parties. What's up, Lindsay Reed? Good to see you again. Goofy Wise says it's ironic you say leftists don't do anything when capitalists historically off them. Goofy Wise, again, you're being hyperbolic. I don't know what work you're doing. I saw you said a couple of things in there, but yeah, you know, you can miss me with that. I'm not here to fight with you. I'm here to form a coalition with you and like let's do the work together. All right. Jack says, dumb question. No such thing as a dumb question, Jack. Isn't Trump already rich? Why would he take bribes? Could you explain this to me? So there is no limit to how rich a rich person wants to be. They want more. They always want more. They have this unquenchable hunger. It's disgusting. And they don't care how many people get hurt while this is happening. There's a book that I recommend everybody check out called Dark Money that is about like the billionaire class and how they have been trying to take over politics for a really long time and how successful they have been and how really just like sick these people are. They have like greed sickness where they don't give a shit if a pipeline is dangerous and can potentially kill a bunch of fucking teenagers. They will use it if it will save them one penny. This is not an example that I'm pulling out of my ass. This is in the book Dark Money, where a bunch of teens got exploded from a shitty gas line that the Kochs had started using, even though it was unsafe. And instead of bending over backwards to make amends, they tried to pay off the dad. And then when the dad instead sued them, they hired like a bunch of shady private detectives to like bug the dad's phone and shit like that so they could win the case against him. You know, it's like you just murdered that dude's daughter because you're trying to save a buck. Do you know the story, Jack, of Midas? You know, he had the Midas touch. Everything he touched turned to gold. We talk about people in capitalist society as having the Midas touch like it's a good thing, but we forget that the entire point of that story was that he touched like his loved ones and they turned to gold. It was a curse. These people have the same curse. Like they don't give a shit if we all fucking get cancer and can't afford the medical treatment. Like they don't give a shit if canceling our health insurance payouts is going to mean that we all die or die of starvation, so long as they can afford one more fucking boat. You know, like, yeah, it's really gross. It's really, really gross. And I think that we should look at all these people who think that it's cool to buy like crazy expensive boats and houses and cars and flash them around at people while there are people dying on the street of starvation and shit like that. We should look at that as like severely embarrassing. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you, man? Like, there should be no lionizing of people who have Ferraris and yachts. It should just be like, this is gross, man. Like, you are gross what you're doing here. Alrighty, let's see here. Goofy Wise is not trying to fight either, but we must have a historical material analysis. I'm giving you one, Goofy Wise. Like, I've given you this woman's name 5-6 times, Erica Chenoweth, and you just disagree without even checking out any of her stuff. Alrighty, Jaroid says, was the Haitian Revolution good or bad? I don't know enough about it to speak on it. TikTok motherfucker says, "Is this ICE detention shooting a little fishy?" I haven't seen anything about it to suggest that it's fishy. I just argue always that it doesn't really matter who's doing the violence. What matter is who's inciting the violence. And I don't know how many more times I can argue this, guys, but it is always coming from the higher ups on the right. There's a reason why political violence has been on the rise since Donald Trump descended the fucking golden escalator in 2015. It is because it is coming from the right. All right, Ace says, why we don't hate billionaires, we just hate what they do with their money. Yeah, I mean, there is no such thing as an ethical billionaire, in my opinion, but there are definitely better billionaires and worse billionaires. I think that the world would be better if there were no billionaires. But if we have to have them, give me a fucking JB Pritzker or a fucking, what's his name? Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, people that are using their money to like get rid of malaria and shit like that. Goofy Wise says, you can't just say someone's name, LOL. What is her terms of effectiveness? I don't have her book memorized, so give it a Google, Goofy Wise. You're coming at me with a very fighty attitude. If you really want to dig into this, send me a DM, email me through my website. I will happily send you all of these resources, my guy. Cameron Hodge, good to see you again, says, thoughts on Trump Epstein statue being removed despite that they have permits. I don't know anything about the permitting issue. I mean, it makes sense. Trump is an authoritarian, so he doesn't really give a shit if the statue has a right to be there. He's going to get rid of it if he doesn't like it. If it does have a legal right to be there, then I hope desperately that whoever is in charge of that statue does the work of suing the Trump administration for removing it unlawfully. Alrighty, let's see here. Dat guy Bojangles says they're making it left versus right instead of top versus bottom. Completely agree with that, Dat guy Bojangles. Let us recognize that the billionaire class is the one that is actually ruining our lives, and it is not voters like Republican voters, Democratic voters. It is not immigrants or trans kids. It is the billionaire class. But also remember that one party is working with the billionaire class. It is the Republican Party. All right, let's see here. Greed is a sickness. Bro said pull up, LOL. Gold Sickness by Tolkien. Oh, I like that, Digital Foods. Yeah. DuckTales made a literal 5-parter about greed sickness back in 1987. Is that true? I watch DuckTales regularly, and I don't remember that episode. But good Lord, do I want to give that a Google now and see if you can find it on YouTube. Jot Puneet says, hunger for money is a fire which only grows more. More the wood feed, the bigger the flame is. Accurate. Excellent comments so far over on Twitch and YouTube, guys. Keep it up. All right, let's get back into these TikTok comments. Chef 4 says, oh my God, a podcast is bipartisan. You go. Thank you. I like to think so. Cameron Hodge says, do you support change in Ukraine? Say they should get back all their land with help. I mean, in a just world, Ukraine should be made whole, including Crimea. But if there is a way to end the war with some concessions with Putin that actually have some teeth, where he's not going to then escalate the war against like Poland and other NATO countries, then yeah, I say make that trade. But I'm also not a Ukrainian. Like, it is up to the people that are living in Ukraine right now to make that decision. And it seems like they would love to just continue fighting for their lands and for their right to autonomy. So yeah, I believe that it is on our best interest to continue supporting Ukraine because Russia does not seem to be abating any. It seems like they're continuing to escalate, and so we need to be prepared to help the NATO countries as they are potentially getting into a war with Russia as well. What's up, Banda Boss? I'm doing good. What'd you think of those videos that I sent you? All right, East beats Westy Bestie says, but then you're abandoning the people to Russia. That's terrible. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Goofy Wise says, both parties are funded by the billionaire class. They work for them. Good cop, bad cop. That is inaccurate, Goofy Wise. So if you look at the history of American politics since 1980, you see a drastic difference between the two political parties in regards to how much water they're holding for the billionaire class. And the Republican Party does a lot more for the rich than the Democratic Party does. And as much as you might hate to admit it, but Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden all raised taxes on the richest Americans, not as much as the Republicans cut taxes on the richest Americans, but they still did it some. They potentially could have done it more, but they had an intransigent Republican Party that wasn't willing to work with them on anything. In addition to that, the Democratic Party was like, all right, well, you're not going to let us tax the rich any more than this. Well, maybe we can have government services and programs and support the unions so that we can strengthen the working class and middle class in a different way. It is true that the billionaire class gives money to both parties, but mostly they give money to the Republican Party. The billionaire class that gives money to Democrats, they either do it because they believe it's the morally right thing to do, or they do it because they want to influence the Democrats if they win office. And what influence means is trying to water down their for the people working class policies, which they have been successful at doing in the past. But that's different than billionaire money supercharging an already pro billionaire Republican platform. So yeah, just miss me with that both sides stuff, Goofy. Like I really appreciate you being here, but honestly, you're not coming here with the attitude of somebody who's interested in engaging. You're trying to fight. You're trying to be right, my guy. Let's see here. Goofy Wise says there was a material interest in funding Democrats for profit. That's accurate. I didn't say it wasn't. Cameron Hodge says, "Do you plan on buying and reading Kamala Harris's book?" It's not at the top of my list. I like Kamala Harris. I don't really need to read another breakdown of why that election was terrible. Geroid says, was violence against Nazis justified? I mean, it was a world war. You know, they were allied with Japan. They attacked our country. You know, like wars are different than, you know, than civil uprisings, shall we say. Let's see here. Jack Jack says, do you personally own a firearm? No, I do not. Ace says, when did the Republicans get so corrupt? Because I feel like they were somewhat corrupt before Trump. Oh, 100%. I think, you know, without digging into the details, I think you could basically say that the Republican Party has slowly been getting more and more corrupt ever since Nixon, potentially, maybe earlier than that. But yeah, once the parties switched their ideology on racial inequality issues, it really seemed like they were like, oh shit, now we have this voter base that is just like locked in, so we can really fuck over the working class, and they'll still vote for us because we'll tell them that we're protecting them from black people and minorities and shit like that, and gay people. Cameron Hodge says, how would a government shutdown affect everyday Americans? So a lot of government services that are currently available will no longer be available. Public parks will not be available. It'll be difficult to you know, get any issue that you are having with payments or reimbursements. It'll be really difficult to you know, to settle those because, you know, all of the government agencies that are deemed essential will be running on skeleton crews. The Trump administration is hostile to the idea of a stable government that works for the people. So it's possible that they use the government shutdown to eliminate agencies that other presidents would say are essential, you know, to Americans. So, I mean, long story short, Americans are going to get hurt. They are going to get hurt by a government shutdown. You know, I personally believe that that's kind of the move still because I think it's wrong to vote to continue funding the Trump government because of the things that they are doing. Right. Geroid says, do you think we should legitimize Nazi ideology by debating it? No, I mean, I think debates are stupid just in general. Goofy Wise says, you're a liberal. I'm not arguing for my POV. I'm not fighty. Everything I'm saying is material. But you have to understand the tone that you're coming at here with, man. Like, you're not asking questions. You're just kind of like making these blanket statements that are, you know, kind of inaccurate. And, you know, you're not really ingesting the things that I am coming at you with. You're just saying no to my stuff. So you kind of understand how I might be getting the vibe that you're not here in good faith, that you're being very fighty. And you're calling me a liberal. I don't know if I would call myself a liberal. I call myself a progressive Democrat. Right. CS1 says, did you watch Ezra Klein talk about why the government shutdown is necessary? I skimmed his article about it where he said, like, you know, if Democrats have a better plan than shutdown, I'd love to hear it. I'm real on the fence about Ezra Klein. Like, I think he's very smart and he's made some very good points, but he really is suffering, I think, from like blue state elite Democrat syndrome, where he doesn't really, he's not like in the trenches, you know, like he's not talking to regular people. I don't think, like, there's just like, yeah, I don't know, something. He has this line in his book Abundance where he says, like, you know, so and so government is an authoritarian dictatorship, but they have high speed rail. And I'm like, what exactly are you advocating for here, Ezra Klein? So yeah, yeah. Chocolate Dragon says, "Oh, it's not truly live, right?" No, it is truly live. I spend a lot more time on my TikTok comments because I have a lot more there. Chocolate Dragon. Right, let's see here. The Valley of the Golden Sun miniseries. Yeah, I'll check that out. Jot Puneet says the NYC mayor hot pick the Indian Muslim guy. Is he a good candidate? Yeah, Mamdani is excellent. I really like Mamdani. And I think that the Democratic Party is being stupid by not openly and enthusiastically endorsing him. Right, Brando says, "Where do we find your stand-up calendar?" We have it on it's on my website. I just booked my tour for next year, and my boss is having a baby, and I have a bunch of schedule conflicts next year. So right now, my tour for next year is over a year away. I'm doing basically 2 months in December, in early December. And once those dates become more finalized, once the cities that we are going to and uh, and the the clubs that we are at will be more finalized, then that stuff will be on my website. Scott Claro says Florida dates. No, I asked for the Florida dates, but Steve wants to book somebody on the East Coast probably for that. But also he's having a baby, so he might end up canceling those March shows because that's going to be really close to his wife's due date. Right. CS says, "What do you think about Graham Plattner?" I actually don't know who that is. Geroid says Schnazi ideology shouldn't be entertained as opinion and should be crushed by any means, especially violence. I don't think that violence is right in any situation, Geroid. But yeah, there's a thing that happened. This is what I think happened to the discourse regarding like far right wing ideologies. I think that we all kind of like agreed at one point that certain things were good and certain things were bad, and so we weren't up on the arguments for why they are bad, which allowed a group of people to come in and say, "Wait, but is it bad?" And so now they're arguing it, and because we've all just kind of like been accepting it as rote, we're not prepared to argue back, and we have to kind of like go back and remember what all of our arguments against like being a schnazi and women being able to vote and have jobs and have their own credit cards and yeah, the whole debate culture, the whole tolerance for intolerance thing is part of that, of course. Like we forgot that we need to go, hard against the ideology, even if we are not being violent. And again, I do not advocate for any kind of violence at all. Right, it's the Rocketeer says, "I'll fill in for Steve if he taps out. I'll start writing my act now." Thank God it's the Rocketeer. We need you, man. We need you ready. Digital Food says, "Steve canceled the show. That feels out of character." I mean, actually, the last tour I did with him, he did cancel the show, but it was for a very good cause. We had a friend who was very sick. Chocolate Dragon says, "Oh, okay, thanks. Well, then a question I'm curious is not American. Is it true most Americans think of communism when somebody mentions socialism, or is it a stereotype? Maybe it depends on the person." So because we had this thing in America called the Red Scare, where we were just demonizing the words communism and socialism, there are certain people who have not been able to shake that off and have not been able to actually dig in to what those words really mean. And so there is a strong population of America that just associates socialism and communism is the same thing, and just both of those words mean bad. And yeah, it's not great. I'm part of a movement of people trying to reintroduce those terms as not necessarily evil, and that we already kind of have both of those things in America right now, which I think we should have a little bit more, and that no country that has ever called itself socialist or capitalist or communist is actually socialist or communist. Alrighty. Let's see here. Yeah, Restream is the website that I use to push out to TikTok and YouTube. So yeah, I get that. But I mean, also, it's not completely out of left field if I'm not answering a ton of comments on TikTok and YouTube to think that it might be not a live broadcast. All right, Droid says, "Do you agree that words and ideas often produce violent outcomes?" I don't think it often produces violent outcomes, but I do think that certain people, very specifically, are saying things that are incentivizing people to do violence, and we need to do what we can to take power away from those people so that they are not able to incite violence going forward. There's a reason why so many of us looked at the way that Trump was acting back in 2015 and thought he's unelectable, because we all saw the incitements to violence. We all saw the nod to authoritarianism. And we saw where that was going. We were like, oh, we agreed decades ago that these things, that these qualities are deal breakers. So nobody's going to vote for him, right? But we forgot that we needed to make this argument for a new generation of people, like why you should not have an authoritarian, why you should not have somebody who is corrupt, why you should not have somebody who's inciting violence be the president of the United States. All right, let's see here. Geroid says 500 pieces of anti-trans legislation passed between 2020 and 2024 is violence, I think. Geroid says, which administration was that? So Geroid, I'm fucking red flagging that stat that you just listed there, because I do not believe that the Biden administration passed 500 pieces of anti-trans legislation. If 500 pieces of anti-trans legislation were passed in that 4-year period, I am confident that it was specifically in red states that it was passed. So I guess you could miss me with that both sides nonsense of yours. And yeah, if you really have a problem with anti-trans legislation, then fucking don't vote for Republicans. Vote for Democrats instead. Right. Jack says, Jared, ask what former presidents are doing now. What do you think Trump will do after office? So hopefully there is an after office for Trump. He is going to try to stay president until he dies. And I think we all need to work our asses off to make sure that he is not successful in that attempt. And he will do exactly what he did the last time that he was out of office, which was continue to have political rallies, continue to grift his followers by selling them stupid fucking hats and crypto coins and NFTs and shit like that. And he's gonna, depending on who's in charge of the government, should he not be in office anymore, he is probably going to be in legal jeopardy for things that he did during his first and second term. As much as he can be in legal jeopardy because of the Supreme Court case that gave presidents immunity if the Supreme Court likes them. But yeah, there are still, I think 4 outstanding cases maybe that total something like 60 indictments that will potentially be restarted once he is out of office. Again, depending on who's in charge of the Justice Department. Droid says Kamala said she would follow the law where the trans rights are concerned. Okay, Droid, not really sure what that is in reference to. Crazy Monsoon says if he survives past administration, he's going to be charged with crimes and put on trial. I sure hope so, Crazy Monsoon. He definitely deserves it. Scott Clower says he will have to go to a country that doesn't extradite. I mean, I thought he was going to do that after his first term, but I guess I underestimated how much a rich and powerful piece of shit can delay things long enough to get reelected. Alrighty. Fogwar Productions says, I really do think JD Vance is doing everything he can to set up for 2028. I mean, I hope that we have an election between JD Vance and a Democrat, because I believe that the Democrats will win that race. But yeah, Donald Trump is not stepping down. He is either going to try to stay president till he's dead or fail, or he is going to die before his first term is over from his extremely terrible diet and living habits. Droid says Biden and Kamala's stances were that they would leave it up to the states if elected again. Droid, what you're talking about is a very specific issue regarding when children are allowed to transition and who's allowed to play in what sports leagues. But there were, in both the Biden and potential Kamala Harris administration, protections for the trans community that the Trump administration threw out, where states were limited in what kind of laws they would be able to pass to harm the trans community. So, Droid, I don't know what you're doing here. I don't know if you are here because you believed a bunch of propaganda about how both sides are terrible to the trans community, or if you are specifically here to spread misinformation about how both sides are bad for the trans community. But I will reiterate that the Democratic Party is the party of protecting marginalized communities, including the entire LGBTQ spectrum, emphasis on the T. And you can nitpick whatever thing that a Democrat did that wasn't 100% perfect on those issues. It is still leagues better than what the Trump administration is currently doing right now to harm the trans community. And so, yeah, anybody that wants to argue that Biden was worse or that Kamala Harris was worse, I could introduce you to 1,000 fucking trans people who would beg you to go back in time and vote for Kamala Harris. Or please, can we have a dementia-ridden Joe Biden in charge again, so that I'm not fucking being persecuted left and right. Alrighty, scrolling down the bottom of TikTok comments. Jamie says they labeled them terrorists, which puts them in a lot of danger. I believe you were talking about the Republican Party. TC says, and how have those ideals done for them at the polls? I'm not really sure what you mean by that, TC. Diego Vargas, unfortunately, not enough people care about the trans community, and it seems that this topic hurts Democrats. I don't really buy that argument. I know a lot of Democrats in the party have said that maybe we need to be more conservative on trans issues to win elections. But I don't believe the Democratic Party wants to do that. I believe that that would be, even if that was enacted, which I don't think it will be, it would be a calculated decision to get power so that a worse administration for marginalized communities cannot get into power. Not showing my pretty face says, do we really think Biden was mentally impaired or just like an old guy with better days than others? So I'm in the middle of Jake Tapper's book where he talks to, like, I think over 200 sources within the government at that time. And it does seem like there were good days and bad days. It seems like there were people within his administration and his inner circle who were hiding things from the rest of the Democratic Party and the country in general, who were lying to people about what Joe Biden was like in meetings. That being said, number one, I will still take a pile of Joe Biden's dusty old bones over the current administration. Like, dusty old bones does not build fucking concentration camps. Dusty old bones does not have a fucking cryptocurrency. Dusty old bones is not canceling fucking research into pediatric cancer remedies, and shit like that. And also, Biden put a really good team together. We had Lena Khan over at the Federal Trade Commission. We had an NLRB that was siding with the unions for the first time in a generation. He actually got the Inflation Reduction Act passed and a bunch of other bipartisan legislation, including a infrastructure bill. So it's like, yeah, was he enfeebled? Were we lied to about how with it he was? It seems like it. It wasn't the entire Democratic Party that was doing that. It was specific people in his administration. But did he have like full-on dementia? No, I think it's clear that he didn't. But yeah, he definitely wasn't as with it as people were saying in his administration. Geroid says, it's strange to represent their own words as propaganda. I mean, you can take a sentence out of context, Geroid. That is exactly what you're doing. Biscuit says, what do you think about states leaving the union in the modern day? I think it's kind of like cutting off your nose to spite your face. I'm more in favor of the sort of soft secession that states like California, Oregon, and Washington are talking about doing. It doesn't seem productive to try to leave the union. It doesn't seem like it would be good for both the states that are leaving and the states that are staying. Right, Diego Vargas says, Lexington law firm just got slapped by the scam police. Not sure of the name of the agency. What's going on there with Lexington law firm? Don't know anything about it. Chocolate Dragon says, do you think the presidential system fits America, or would you prefer some other system? I mean, I think that we need to restructure our democracy to some extent, because the past couple of decades have seen a lot of weight being put into the hands of both the presidency and the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court especially has been stacked, unjustly with right-wing extreme ideologues. And so, fixing Congress and redistributing more power from the executive and the judiciary to Congress, I think would make the presidency work better. Let's see here. Jacob Vargas says, I got a reimbursement because they scammed a lot of people. Just got a compensation yesterday. Oh, interesting. I gotta, what do you call it? I gotta check that out. Right. Fog of War Production says, if Joe Biden wasn't with it, then who was pulling the strings, do you reckon? So I'm not finished with the book, but there are a couple of people in his inner circle who seems like they were kind of like clinging to power, like really enjoying how powerful they were. It seems like maybe his wife was kind of part of that as well. But yeah, so I'm not done with the book, so I don't have like a full list of who was responsible and who was not. Jeffrey Shelton says, how is Trump hurting trans people? I don't actually have the everything that he has done to hurt trans people on my brain at the moment. But let's see here. Let me see if I have anything in my notes about that. And if anybody in the chat has that information on hand, let me know, because let's see here. Yeah, I'm not seeing it in my notes right now. So yeah, if you want, who asked that question? Jeffrey, if you want me to give you that data after the live stream, I will find it for you and I'll send it to you. Just send me a DM or send me an email through my website or go to my Discord and put a message there. But yeah, the information's out there. I just don't have it on my brain right now. It's a little bit of a brain fart happening. All right. Tink says Trump is not allowing the VHA to treat trans people. All right. There we go. East Meets Westy Bestie says stopping their drug treatments. Seems like the Trump administration is not allowing people to get the hormone treatment that they need. Right. Lauren says kicking them out of the military, calling them terrorists. That is all, also part of that. Thank you. The chat is providing. All right. Let's see here. Jago Vargas says, has North Carolina and Wisconsin Supreme Court slapped down their gerrymandered maps? I believe that they have. I don't remember. I haven't gotten an update on North Carolina. Wisconsin has been in the process of redistricting, I think, for a while now. So I think that we are most likely going to get fairer maps in Wisconsin in 2026. And I think North Carolina the latest by 2028. But I would need to Google that to get a definite update on it. I haven't heard anything about it in a long time. Jeffrey Shelton, you rule. Stop it, man. You can make me blush over here. Dan Blackwood says kicking them out of the military and denying them retirement benefits. There we go. We got another one. 312MQ says maybe Joe Biden or the other guy should run then because they did a good job. I don't know. Joe Biden's pretty old too, so I'm not too happy about that. But yeah, we can get them on the advisory committee. Like, yeah, fucking staff the government, man. Do good. Not showing my pretty faces. Can you talk about the soft succession? So yeah, soft succession is like not working with the government in ways that states normally do. Withholding federal taxes from the federal government, which is advantageous to blue states because blue states on net provide more money to the federal government than they take out. Not cooperating with ICE. It's just like, we're not fully leaving the union, but we are going to have like our own vaccine recommendations. Like we're going to have our own panel that deals with infectious diseases and vaccines, because right now we can't trust the CDC or the Department of Health to do those things. Empowering a sort of like blue state Department of Education to make sure that marginalized communities and children with disabilities can still access quality education. I believe that stuff is all on in the buffet of in the soft secession buffet. Flyboy30 says, but we could trust them during COVID, LOL. I mean, no, we couldn't, because the Trump administration was in charge during COVID. And yeah, but I mean, I get your point, man. The CDC, they put out a lot of really good information during COVID. It was better than what the Trump administration was putting out. So yeah, you can miss me with that both sides nonsense. Jamie says, if we did that, that would be a major roadblock to DT's destruction of the U.S. Potentially, Jamie. Like, I'm worried about what mechanisms the federal government would have to fight soft secession. Like, I'm not sure how successful it will be, but I do think that the blue state should at least try. Be caught fighting, and at the very least, we could give the Trump administration something else they have to do, so that they don't have such a clear path for just full-on totalitarian dictatorship. Alrighty, CDC works for companies, not for us. That is inaccurate, Flyboy. Jago Vargas says, wasn't this generation supposed to be more progressive? Somehow Trump made gains with young people. Yeah, I mean, you can blame social media for that, because social media was flooded with right-wing influencers like Ben Shapiro and Benny Johnson and Charlie Kirk, who were specifically targeting young people and young men. With their propaganda. Social media is extremely easy to manipulate if you have a lot of money and power, which the billionaire class does. And so they use their money to get people fighting amongst themselves, push exactly the kind of propaganda that would convince young people to either vote for Republicans or not vote at all. And so, yeah, there's going to be a lot of reprogramming that is going to need to happen, a lot of toxic masculinity that's going to have to be routed out because of the damage that a lot of these influencers and social media channels have caused on the younger generation. Alrighty, Fikasika says, why is U.S. buying Russian uranium and other rare metals while telling others not to do business with Russia? U.S. imports from Russia is ATH for those. Fikasika, I don't know. I gotta Google that because that does seem concerning. And I wonder if that was something that was going on during the Biden administration also. Geroid says, Harris responds with, we should follow the law when asked if trans people should have gender affirming care. All right, Geroid, yeah, sure, man. You understand my main argument here, right? Which is that Trump and Republicans are worse, right? You understand that that's like a bigger deal, like better is better and worse is worse. Like you can cherry pick all of the specific things that Democrats have said in the past, but you will never convince me that better is not worse than worse. Alrighty, let's see here. Gen Z, Fogwar Productions says Gen Z was brought up in chaos and desires stability. Yeah, I mean, this is what happens when, COVID fucks up your in schooling and you're being told that the planet's not going to be here because of climate change and the job market fucking sucks and you're never going to be able to afford a house. Like, you become radicalized when you feel helpless. And the Republican Party is there telling them, hey, you feel helpless because of trans people and because of immigrants. And so that is a really easy answer for them to digest. Shawnee Flytrap says, why doesn't our government want to acknowledge the date of Palestine or the state of Palestine? I'm not going to put this totally on the Trump administration, though the Trump administration is worse on this issue than Democratic administrations in the past. But Israel has been a very powerful ally of America for a really long time. And so we have been kind of like skewing our support towards Israel for some good reasons and some bad reasons. It's a quagmire. People write entire books on just that one specific topic. But yeah, short version is that the general policy of the United States for decades has been to support Israel regardless. And I think that's wrong, 100%. Shiny Flattrap says it's definitely both sides, even a ton of Dems won't. Yes, but way more Democrats stand up to Israel than Republicans. So again, what we are seeing here is another example of better is better and worse is worse. Right. Diego Vargas says, is Israel an extension of the U.S.? Great excuse to keep ongoing wars in the Middle East. I mean, definitely some administrations have treated it that way. I don't believe that was, I don't believe that was strict, codified policy during other administrations. Even if it might have been just, part of the foreign policy blobosphere that exists in DC, where, there's just like all these ideas that need to be challenged that we're all just being taken as fact. All right, Chocolate Dragon says, I'd argue that the notion of young people being progressive, both in America and Europe, is being thrown around everywhere, but always ends up wrong. It's been always half and half and always will. I don't know if that's true, Chocolate Dragon. I think that we've seen a sea change. We've seen a sea change in this, where the billionaire class has been able to weaponize social media in a way to specifically turn young people more conservative. I don't think that this is like a thing that we saw in the 90s and the early 2000s and the 2010s. But yeah, I'm not going to die on that mountain. I think it's an interesting opinion that you have there. Connor Lamerson says, what's your take on immigration policy? I don't trust the Republican Party on immigration policy. They have been given many opportunities to try to solve this in non-barbaric ways. And not only have they not taken those opportunities, the barbaric things that they are doing are also not solving the problem. The Democrats and Republicans worked on a bill together during the Biden administration to try to address some of these immigration issues. And Trump called the Republicans and said, don't vote for the bill that you wrote, because I want immigration to still be a problem so that I can continue to run on it. The Republican Party doesn't give a shit about solving this problem. They want it to be a problem so they can still have people they can blame problems that aren't the billionaire class. The Democratic Party, as flawed as they are on this and other issues, at least are trying to solve the problem by hiring more immigration judges and hiring more asylum judges. and hire and working with countries below the border to actually solve the root causes of rampant immigration from the south to the north. So yeah, the Trump administration is firing immigration judges for some fucking reason that I could never even begin to explain. Conor Lamerson's, yes, but I mean, if you held power, what would you do specifically with the last 4 years? Yeah, I think the main issues that we have are, number one, a backlog and a complex, Kafka-esque immigration system where it takes thousands of dollars and tens of years in order for somebody to become a naturalized citizen, depending on where they're from. By having a draconian border policy, we are enabling the cartels who, make a lot of money from coyoteing people across the border. What I think we need to do is send resources to places that are suffering from an influx of immigrants so that the rebalancing can happen. Because immigrants put more money into the system than they take out in government services because they're not eligible for all the services that citizens get. It is just when it happens all at once, we don't give the market a time to adjust. We don't give that tax revenue time to get into the system so that we can buy more things and hire more teachers and shit like that. So yeah, cleaning up the immigration process, hiring more asylum and immigration judges, working with countries below us to address some of the root causes of immigration, using federal dollars to assist with cities that are besieged with immigrants and don't have the resources to take care of them. Because, eventually, if those immigrants stay, the tax money will eventually be there. I think we also need to work on spreading the accurate information around immigrants being a net positive for the countries that they are going into, and so that we are being a more welcoming country. All right, let's see here. Thank you, Chocolate Dragon. I appreciate that. You're a great new addition to the Twitch stream, my guy. All right. Conor Lamerson says, do you think the U.S. holds any obligation to its citizens to strongly limit the amount of immigrants that we allow? I don't know. I don't know what that number would be, Conor Lamerson. I think that I'm not advocating for open borders, but I am advocating for recognizing the value of immigrants in this country. Is there a possibility that there would be so many people trying to come to America that it would be a problem? Potentially. I don't think we're even close to that number, specifically because population rates are declining in America. And so if we're even going to keep up a sustainability model of things like, Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, and be able to build more homes and be able to, hire people to work farms, we need those people because America is not producing enough offspring for that. So yeah, it doesn't seem like it's even close to being an issue. Right. Let's see here. No way, Jose says Kamala did that, but people didn't appreciate that. Yeah, 100%. Conor Lamerson says, like, I have empathy, but I don't think the U.S. can have so much focus on immigration and still take care of its citizens. I think so, Conor Lamerson, because again, immigrants are a net positive. We need them. They are. It is better to have them than to not have them. So, right now, America is fighting a bunch of different battles with its hands tied behind its back because we are using all of our resources to build concentration camps and deport people that we actually need. So yeah, I'll take the other side of that any day of the week, Randall Rails says, it's been 4 years. They put about 60% of what they consume. Good luck with that argument. I do not believe that is accurate, Randall. But if you're here in good faith and you want to send me the information, shoot me a DM. Fog War Production says, how can Democrats address demographic concerns stemming from immigration? It's a tough one. There's a cultural element. Like if you are the kind of person who yearns for the days when all of your neighbors looked like you and nobody was celebrating different holidays or speaking different languages or serving different kinds of food, then I mean, yeah, that's rough, man, because the world is becoming more global with every passing day, regardless of who is in charge. And fighting against it is swimming upstream. And we are not salmon, so we're not good at that. You know, I think that America um, has always prioritized protecting its history and its culture. So I'm not too concerned about there not being resources for having like uh, for supporting whatever cultural consistency we would lose by having so many more people from other cultures here in America. Personally, uh, I don't really care. Like the world is constantly in a state of change and flux, and so you will just generally be a happier person if you're not trying to keep things the same. Life is surfing, waves come and go. There's no consistency. Change is the only constant, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a hard pill to swallow, and it's the reason why Republicans do so well by promising we will keep things the way that they are. And they're lying though, like they're not going to be able to. It's just a fact. Maybe there's a better answer out there than that one that I just gave, but yeah, that's my 2 cents on the topic. Like, I just think that's, we will take care of our citizens if we have a responsible government. But can I guarantee that your life will be exactly the same? That your job won't change? That your street won't change? That the restaurants on you in your town won't change? No. But also, like, isn't it fine if it does? Alrighty. S.E. Morgan says it's weird. We don't want the culture of this land to change. I bet the natives would agree. Yeah, totally. Lindsay Reed says, "What do you think about what Newsom said on Colbert last night?" So I only saw clips, Lindsay Reed, and I mean he's on point. Like his messaging during the Trump administration is easily top 3 of all the politicians on the left right now. So yeah, just based on the little that I saw, I'm like, yeah, accurate, 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 accurate. All right, Captain Tripp says every major country has rejected globalism. Countries with mass protests against mass immigration: America, Australia, England, Ireland, Scotland. So, I mean, they are rejecting it. Captain Trips doesn't mean it is a good thing. It doesn't mean that they will be successful. We have seen a rise in right-wing ideologies over the past like 15 or 20 years that I do not believe was organic, Captain Trips. And if I'm being honest, I don't really think that you are here in good faith because I knew it. I fucking knew it, man. You brought up the rapes. Of course you did, man. Yeah, please get your news from other sources, Captain Trips. Alrighty, let's see here. Jamie says, "Who is your top 3?" Oh, I couldn't even begin to discern that. This is not like a March Madness kind of thing. Like these are my definitive top 3s. It's just like he's in the cloud. He's in the soup of politicians who I think are doing good work right now, like Bernie Sanders and AOC and JB Pritzker and Jasmine Crockett and Maxwell Frost and yeah, there's a ton of Democrats doing great work right now. Right. Let's see here. Dusty Boyer says Newsom can't troll anyone. He shouldn't be allowed to talk with millions leaving California, including myself. Dusty, that's not a question. So guess what? You're out of here, and I fucked your mom. Alrighty. All right, everybody. We are at an hour and 10. Peach Fib says, "Why do you think it's not organic?" Excellent question, Peach Fib. So the reason why I don't think it's organic, number one, is I started seeing this even before Trump was elected in 2016. I started noticing weirdly the information environment on social media and the news media tending to, I don't know, like overhype Republicans, overhype Donald Trump, overhype nationalists, isolationist rhetoric. And I thought it was really weird. And I was like, this is really strange. And then all this information started coming out about how Russia was flooding American social media with narratives to get us to fight amongst ourselves and to hype up Donald Trump and authoritarian ideologies because that helps Russia. Russia is an authoritarian regime, so they want to try to destroy democracies that would be a threat to Russia. Then I started noticing the same thing, but for billionaire-supported narratives, like people shouldn't vote, or both parties are the same, or you know, Democrats are the party of billionaires and Republicans are the party of working class. And I'm like, that's a lot of bullshit, you know, like I really can't see anybody benefiting from this except for billionaires in the Republican Party. So then I was like, well, that seems like it might be the same thing as the Russia thing. And then I read this book called Dark Money, and I was like, oh, it's even worse than I thought it was. Like, the rich really have been doing that, you know? The rich 100% have been flooding money into our information spheres, legacy media, right-wing media, social media, in order to push these narratives that you know, directs public opinion towards more right-wing authoritarian philosophies. Yeah, you know, anti-immigration, isolationist, fascist shit. Because it's more profitable for them to do that, as opposed to having to deal with actual democracies that wish to regulate them so that they don't poison their citizens with chemical runoff from their factories and shit like that. Alrighty, let's see here. Take MMA says, so you're gonna ask people to talk about politics, but they kick anybody out that disagrees with you. I don't kick people out that disagree with me. Take MMA. There are a bunch of people here in the live stream that disagree with me that I have not kicked out. I kick people out who spread misinformation and propaganda on my live stream. If you ask a question and I can tell just by your question that you and I don't align politically, I'm not going to kick you out. So long as you're asking in good faith, you can stay here. But if you're trolling with a bunch of bullshits and misinformation because you want to spread certain narratives, then I get to kick you out because it's my life. Bobby says, no, it's not. What about Gates, Buffett, Soros, and on and on? All Democrats, paper trails done. So, Bobby, you just named 3 billionaires who support Democrats. And there's almost 1,000 billionaires just in America alone. So you can't just look at specific billionaires. You have to look at the net. You have to look at the average. And the average says that 75% of all billionaire political donations go to Republican Party candidates. And it makes sense why they would, because the Republican platform is what the billionaires want. It is cutting their taxes and cutting regulations for their businesses, whereas the Democratic platform is more pro-worker, pro-99%. So Bobby says, sorry, don't lie. You know, I'm just going to... He did not ask a question about Newsom. He said Newsom can't troll anyone. Take MMA. You can fucking miss me with that. You just being a typical Democrats. All right, sounds good. You're out of here. And Bobby, you said sorry, don't lie, which maybe you put that before I finished my rant. Did you hear my rant, Bobby, or are you just gonna completely fucking ignore it? Sorry, I can't text that fast. So yeah, what do you think about what I just told you about how not only does the data show that billionaires give more money to Republicans, more billionaires give more money to Republicans, but also that it makes sense that they would, because the Republican platform is the platform of the billionaire class. Let me know, Bobby. Let me know what you think about that. Captain Trips is right. Billionaires want to steal your grandmother's social security check. Yes, that is 100% accurate, Captain Trips. Digital Food says Jared only kicks people out if he slept with their moms. Yes, that is accurate. But unfortunately, I have fucked a lot of your moms. So everybody is on the potential chopping block there. Yeah, Bobby, still waiting for you to respond to that, my guy. Chocolate Dragon says, I heard this convincing theory that trying to keep the purity of your culture ends up destroying it. I'm no expert, but I expect that, well, gatekeeping culture from others makes it harder to find people to carry it further. Assimilation of immigrants is always the key. That I totally buy that 100%. Even if you just look at a biological level, if you're not introducing genetic diversity into your populations, you're just going to become worse. Like your brains are going to turn to fucking mush, and you're not going to, and your offspring are going to be like fucking Austrian royals in the 1600s. They've all got fucking hemophilia and only have like 3 fingers and shit like that. Alrighty, Bobby says, where's the data come from? Bobby, this is the deal that I make with people that want specific data, who are specifically arguing with me about things like, do billionaires control the Republicans or the Democrats more? I can give you the data, but you have to DM me. Have to prove to me that you're not just trying to waste my time. Send me a DM, email me through our website, go to my Discord. If you hit me up on any of those channels, I will provide you all of the data regarding this issue. I don't have everything memorized. I only have the broad strokes memorized. Alrighty. Fletch lives again says MILFs. Let's see here. Genghis Khan for generation. Yeah, you're all my children now. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all the questions and the gifts and the likes and the shares. I really appreciate all of you being here, even the people that I don't agree with, and that maybe we got a little spicy on each other. Regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. DMs are open. Do not be shy about hitting me up. I want to be a resource for you guys, whether it is answering your questions about politics or getting you more involved with organizations that need volunteers, teaching you how to engage with people on politics to get more people voting and get more people voting for better politicians and replace every Republican with a Democrat. And then if we don't like those Democrats, replacing those Democrats with better Democrats. If you want to support the channel and the live stream financially, you can, but you don't have to. I know that we're all struggling. But if you want to, I have a Patreon that you can join for as little as $1 a month. That you can find link in my bio. Just click on the links page and it'll send you to my Patreon. I also have a store that you can buy things from, and you can send gifts and shit on TikTok and Twitch and YouTube. All of that stuff is it helps me out a lot, and you can become a super fan and shit like that. But again, you don't have to. Let's see here. Anything else? The Discord, I'm a big fan of. It's a great resource for recommendations for books and podcasts and work that you can do if you are like me and you see what's going on out there and you want to help and you want to be part of the solution. All right. Send your MILFs. That's pretty funny. Bobby says, I'm 56 and ex-military and law enforcement. I respect you even if we disagree. All right, respect, Bobby. So send me your DM, my guy, and I'll send you all the information. Condor Lamerson says, what does the Democratic political identity look like post-Trump in your opinion? I wouldn't make that prediction, but I hope that it looks more like the progressive wing, like younger, more progressive Democrats that go harder against the billionaire class, that go harder for equality, that don't make so many concessions because they're trying to appeal to every single human being. I would much rather have a Democrat who turns some people off because of their beliefs than a Democrat who turns people off because they seem insincere or they're just saying whatever they need to say to get elected. Alrighty, let's see here. Oh, I don't know what a DM is. Bobby, if you go to my bio on TikTok and you click the link there, it will send you to a links page, which one of the things that you can do is email me through that links page. If you have any issues doing that, come back to the live stream and I'll help you out even more. But yeah, you can email me through my website. You can go to my Discord. And all of that is available to you if you just go to my profile and you click on the link there. All right, everybody. Chocolate Dragon says, oh, I thought you were ending the live stream already. Yeah, I usually do a couple of questions after I do my outro because I'm a glutton and I love engaging with you guys on politics. All right, everybody. But I am at an hour 15, so I'm definitely going to have to head out of here now. So thank you again for all the support and the questions, everybody. Do the work. We need people doing the work. We need more people doing the work. The work is working. We just need more people doing it. So go out there and do the work. Be good to each other. Be good to yourselves. Self-care is part of the work. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel. Have a good Wednesday, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye.